Hi, I'm Simon Whale, Chief Kerfuffle, and I am delighted to have today here Adam Walker. How are you, Adam?
Hello, Simon. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm particularly well. Now, Adam, you could be accused of many things. You were almost patient X, weren't you, in terms of the original agency trainers I've known. As long as I've been in the business, the person to go to was yourself.
Yes, well, I've trained literally hundreds of thousands of people over the years.
I do. Most of the clients have gone through the repeat books as well afterwards, haven't they? There was a fairly rich step over there.
We shared an awful lot of customers in those days, that's for sure.
You did, and you drove a lot of business, so I must thank you for that in itself. But I think we were just talking a little bit off air. It's changed a little bit now, hasn't it? As for what has been a long, distinguished career on the training side of things, I think it's fair to say you still hold a lot of passion for that side of things. You've moved more now into the business transfer side of things within the industry itself. Do you want to just elucidate a bit of that?
Yes, so I've always done a combination of three things. I've done some sales and management training, I've done strategic consultancy, and I've also sold businesses. I've done that for 25 years, but different parts of the business are busy at different times.
Yeah.
And the last few years, the business sales has just been almost overwhelming, the sheer volume of work in that space. There's now 7 of us on the business sales team. We've done £140 million worth of sales in the last 6 years. It really has been very, very busy indeed. And I still do a little bit of training, and I do consultancy work, largely for people who are wanting to sell businesses in 2 or 3 years' time, and they come to me and say, I'd like 2 million for the business, and I say, well,
you said not like that.
It's only worth 1 million at the moment,
yeah.
But let me show you what it would need to look like to be worth the 2 million.
So it's a very focused sort of consultancy.
Absolutely, it's an exit plan rather than just a general business plan. And then we set out what the business needs to look like in terms of its turnover and its profitability.
Yeah.
And then we do a 20 or 30 page detailed business plan, and then they spend 2 or 3 years working through that business plan, and it can really be transformational. And it's not just increasing the profit. There are lots of other things that you can do to increase the value of a business prior to sale. You can literally double the value of it in 2 or 3 years, and some of those things are counterintuitive.
It strikes me there when you're talking though that's even if you're not immediately thinking about coming out, in 5 years, that's not a bad process to get involved with anyway, is it?
Well, it doesn't do any harm to increase the profit of the business. You've got more.
But to be ready to go as well at any time.
Yeah.
That's because you may get an ad hoc offer that you weren't intending on, being receptive to. But if you've got everything lined up in an order, you're going to maximise your margin, aren't you?
Well, very much so. And a lot of people start a business because they were made redundant, or because they can't stand their old boss, or they go into business for all sorts of reasons, and they build a business, but they've never got a plan for how they get out of that business. Yeah. And then one day, they get to be 55 or 60 or 65 and think, well, although what I have built has given me a good living for years, it's not actually worth very much. And if the business is going to continue, you have got to think very carefully about an exit strategy and how best to achieve that.
And it's in exactly the same way that an agent finds it hard to give bad news to the vendor about the price of their home. You're in the same position, telling them that their business that they've worked for over the years isn't better than the one down the street, is it, and worth all that money?
Well, it can be really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I mean, at the moment, if people have a sales-only business, it's worth very little indeed.
Is it the lowest it's ever been in terms of a multiplier?
It's probably at or about the bottom of the cycle for a sales business. And people just can't understand that this business is making them £250,000 a year, and they can live, handsomely from it, and yet no one else wants to buy it, and they find that really very distressing.
What would we be talking about? What are the metrics that they do it on? Is it turnover, profitability? Do you pivot dependent on how the business is set up?
Well, a sales business is sold on profit, not turnover, because it's very hard to combine a sales business with another business in the town. And although there are different ways of expressing the value, at the moment they make about 1 times profit, or about 30% of turnover, maybe 50 at the very most, or they make about 70% of the pipeline value and 30% of the stock value, or they make about 100% of the pipeline value. But however you express that, it comes to a very similar amount of money.
Right, okay.
And it's about 30%.
And outside of that, it would have to be a strategically important purchase to break those multiples.
Well, even at that price, there are sales businesses for which there is no buyer at the moment. You know, people just don't want to get into that space. Wow. And I have to say that the sales businesses at the moment are an absolute bargain. And if you look back over the years, the people who've got rich have done that by doing the opposite to what everyone else was doing. You know, people have bought houses right at the bottom of a recession, and now they've gone through the roof in value.
So it is. So even in this area when it's all very strict numbers and everything else, you can get trends and fashions. Essentially, as you said, it's not fashionable for sales at the moment.
They're just out of fashion at the moment.
So here we go, watchers. Talk to Adam if you want some top bargains. Anyway, that's the first bit.
Well, we at the moment we're not selling pure sales businesses because there is almost no market.
Really, it's just not even worth it.
But I've got a client who sold a big letting business 4 years ago for 2 million. He invested just over £1 million buying 6 residential sales businesses. His old business made him 200 grand a year, and his new businesses make him 900,000 a year for half the investment. So why would you want to run a business that gives you 10% return on capital when you could buy another business that gives you 90% return on capital? So I think there's real opportunity for people to pick up a bargain and go into the sales market now when no one else is. And I'm sure that the prices will recover at some point in the next housing cycle. It's just a question of when. And letting businesses, there's always a market for them. The prices go up and down, but there's always a market. Sales businesses, there's maybe 3 years in every cycle when you get good money for them. And then something happens like the Brexit referendum or Northern Rock going bankrupt, and overnight they're worth nothing. And then the cycle repeats itself in due course. So I think this is a great time to pick up a bargain on the sales side.
Well, you've heard it here from him first. You know, talk to Adam about it now. And thank you for that, Adam.
Everyone's kerfuffling.